Good afternoon, preschool friends. Good to see you again. We're up to Reading with Rach, episode 7. All right, so for today's story, we have a beautiful little story about two crocodile brothers. The big crocodile, the big brother, his name is Sol. And the little crocodile who's blue, he's the little brother, his name is Ernst. So we'll call him Ernie for short. That'll be his nickname. And the name of this book is The Puddle Pail. And this is one of these stories where the title intrigued me, and then it turned out that the story was not really about the title so much. So I want to ask you at the end what you think the story was really about, okay? Okay, here we go. The Puddle Pail by Elisa Clevin. All right, this is going to be a good one. One bright morning after a storm, Ernie, a young blue crocodile, and his big green brother Sol set off for the beach. They skipped through the wet grass and stamped through the mud, drumming on their shiny pails. "I'm going to fill my pail with shells," said Sol, who loved to collect things. "Well, I'm going to fill my pail with sand and build a sand castle," said Ernie, who loved to make things. "Well, maybe I'll find some rocks too," said Sol. "All shapes and colors for my rock collection, and some feathers for my feather collection, and maybe some string." So Sol bent down to pick up a rubber band. "Look, just the thing for my rubber band collection. You ought to start a collection too, Ernie." "I don't know what to collect," Ernie replied. "So just collect something you really like," said Sol. "Something that comes in all different sizes and colors and shapes. That way, your collection will be interesting." All right, so there they are collecting stuff. Ernie watched the clouds make flower shapes up in the sky and seahorse shapes in the windy blue sky, and he watched a little snake cloud puff up into the shape of a dragon, and he watched a rabbit cloud curling up into a ball. "Clouds are interesting," he said. "I wish I could collect the clouds." "Clouds?" exclaimed Sol. "You can't collect clouds. I mean, think of something else you like." "Stars," said Ernie, imagining the sky at night. "I love to watch the stars." "But you can't collect stars either," said Sol. "They're too far away, and they're too big, and they're very, very hot." "Well, they look small and cold," said Ernie. "I wish I could collect the stars." "I know," said Sol. "Starfishes. Why don't you collect them? I like starfishes in the ocean," said Ernie. "But I don't think I want to collect them." "Well," Sol suggested, "what about a star-shaped cookie?" "Star-shaped cookies, yeah, you could collect star-shaped butter cookies with frosting on them. And star-shaped chocolate ones with sprinkles," Ernie added. "And star-shaped cherry cookies with toasted nuts on them," said Sol. And Ernie's mouth was watering. "Oh, I wish I could collect a bunch of cookies right now in my stomach." Just then, something caught Sol's eye. It was a bottle cap lying in a puddle. "Look at that sparkly bottle cap, Ernie. You should start a bottle cap collection." It's pretty," Ernie agreed. "But I like the puddle that it's in even better." "The puddle?" asked Sol. "It looks like a little piece of sky on the ground. I wish I could collect it," said Ernie. There they are looking at the puddles. "But you can't collect puddles," said Sol. "Oh, yes, I can collect puddles," said Ernie. "They're not too far away, and they're not too big, and they're not too hot, and I don't want to eat them." Splish splash, and Ernie scooped up the puddle and put it into his pail. Ernie," said Sol, "you're not really going to start a puddle collection, are you?" "Oh, yes," said Ernie, "I am." And he scooped up a green puddle, round as a saucer. Splish splash, and it joined the other puddle in the pail. Sol just rolled his eyes at his little brother. "Since you're going to stay here collecting puddles, I'm going to go down to the beach by myself and collect some real things." "Puddles are real," thought Ernie, as he searched for more to collect. "See, here's a purple puddle." and a striped one, and a flowered one. And here's a puddle full of diamonds and a puddle full of squares. See all the patterns? And a puddle full of gumballs, and a puddle full of brooms, and a puddle that looks like an Easter egg, and a puddle like a wheel, and a puddle with a pretzel shape in it. Slippery puddles, smooth puddles, lemony, lettery, cool puddles. Ernie sang a song as he scooped up the puddles. Splish, splash, sang the puddles as they slid and splashed into that pail. Sol came back with his pail, and it was piled high. Look at all this stuff I got, Ernie. 8 feathers, 19 little rocks, 3 clumps of seaweed, a marble, a half a nutshell, a plastic dinosaur without a head. Well, I got a lot of puddles, Ernie announced, all different sizes and colors and shapes. Sol peered into Ernie's pail. Your puddles have all run together. They just look like a pail full of ordinary water. But they're one big puddle now, said Ernie, an Ernst and Sol puddle, and that's the weirdest collection I've ever heard of. Sol replied, I mean, what are you going to do with one big puddle in a pail? See, when he looked in the puddle, all he saw was a picture of him and his brother. I'll think of something. Ernie carried his pail carefully as they started for home. I know, said Sol. You can help me wash the sand off of all my new collections. You can wash your own collections, Ernie replied. I'll think of something else to do with my puddle water, thank you. So Ernie set his puddle pail on the grass, and he sat down on the swing. And while he was swinging, his puddle slowly turned from gold to pink, and clouds were swimming in and out of it just like fishes. See all the colors? Try to think why you think the colors are changing. When night fell, stars collected in the puddle pail, and a little piece of the moon, too. Here it is. See the little piece of the moon? And here's the picture of the stars in the pail right there. Early the next morning, Ernie went out to check on his pail, and a thirsty dog was drinking from it. You like my magic puddle soup? Ernie asked, and the dog wagged her tail and drank some more, leaving Ernie just enough to paint some watercolor pictures that day. There he is watching the dog drink. Ernie painted a picture of the dog, and then he painted some clouds, and he painted some stars, and many of the puddles that he saw, he painted with his watercolors. Sol came by with his pail filled with flowers and acorns and leaves. I started some new collections today, he said. So, what have you got there, Ernie? A dog, replied Ernie, and a painting collection. Oh, said Sol. What a collection, with clouds and stars and everything. I used part of my puddle collection to make it, Ernst explained. And the dog drank the other part. Ernie petted the dog, and he looked at the clouds and the stars and the puddles shining on the grass, and he felt so proud and happy and hungry too, because he hadn't even eaten breakfast yet. But here they are looking at all the pretty paintings he collected. Let's go collect blackberries, he said, from the bushes down the road. Good idea. So Sol grabbed his pail. Maybe we'll find some pennies on the way, or some pine cones, or gum wrappers. And maybe some shadows too, said Ernie. Shadows, said Sol. Ugh, you can't collect shadows. Oh, yes, I can collect shadows, Ernie cried, and he caught one for a second, and he put it in his pail. See the shadow of the butterfly? He put it in his pail. And when it fluttered off, he and Sol filled their pails and themselves with sweet, juicy, yummy blackberries. The end. So now is the time when I ask you, what do you think this story is really about? Was it really about buckets or pails? Or was it even really about the puddles themselves? I think first of all, we can all agree it's definitely about collections, right? So when I told you guys to make a Mother's Day present and we made flower vases, Miss Rachel had to stop and collect all of these old toilet paper rolls. So I started a collection of those, right? So we could do arts and crafts. And teachers like to collect silly things like paper clips. Teachers collect all kinds of paper clips in different sizes and shapes and colors. And teachers also like to collect Post-it notes. We have tons of these collections. And sometimes you might feel like Saul, the older brother, right? And you might collect some pretty shells from the beach. I like to do that too when I go to Cape Cod, one of my favorite places. So what kind of things do you like to collect?